The scalpel trembled in my hand, its cold steel glinting under the surgical lights, and I froze, staring at the patient's open chest. My first solo surgery, and I was drowning in panic, my mind screaming that I'd kill him. Then Dr. Ethan Caldwell's steady voice cut through. "You've got this, Lucas. I'm right here." I was 28, a resident surgeon at St. Mary's Hospital in Chicago, and I clawed my way through med school to prove I belonged. But that night in the OR, with a patient's life in my hands, I felt like an imposter. Ethan, the attending surgeon, was supposed to supervise, but his presence felt like a lifeline. His blue eyes locked onto mine through the surgical mask, calm and unwavering, grounding me in a way I couldn't explain. "Breathe," he said softly. "Follow my lead." My hands steadied, and we moved in sync, saving a man's life in a 6-hour blur of precision and trust. Afterward, alone in the scrub room, I collapsed against the sink, adrenaline crashing. Ethan pulled off his cap, his dark hair damp with sweat, and gave me a smile that felt too warm for the sterile space. "You were incredible, Lucas," he said, his voice low, like a secret meant only for me. My heart stuttered, not from the surgery, but from the way his gaze lingered. I'd always known I was gay, but I'd buried it under ambition, fear, and the weight of a conservative family. Ethan, openly gay and unapologetic, was everything I wasn't: confident, free, and magnetic. We stood there, inches apart, the hum of the hospital fading. His hand brushed mine as he reached for a towel, and I didn't pull away. "You're not alone in this," he whispered, and I knew he wasn't talking about surgery. That moment sparked something dangerous, a connection I couldn't ignore, even as my world threatened to unravel. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of stolen glances and late-night talks in empty hospital corridors. Ethan was 32, a prodigy in cardiothoracic surgery, with a reputation for brilliance and a charm that disarmed everyone. He'd grown up in a small Illinois town, where being out had cost him his family's acceptance, yet he wore his identity like armor. I envied that strength. My own parents, devout Catholics from suburban Ohio, had made it clear being gay was a sin, a choice, a betrayal. I'd spent years hiding, dating women to keep up appearances, until the lie felt like a second skin. One night, after a grueling 18-hour shift, Ethan found me in the on-call room, staring blankly at a coffee-stained textbook. "You look like you need a break," he said, tossing me a protein bar. We ended up on the hospital roof, the Chicago skyline glittering below, sharing stories under a starless sky. He told me about his first love, a high school boyfriend who'd broken his heart when their relationship was exposed. I admitted I'd never had a real relationship, too scared to try. "You deserve to live, Lucas," he said, his voice fierce. "Not just survive." His words hit hard, cracking walls I'd built. Where our shoulders brushed, I didn't move away. Instead, I leaned closer, my heart racing as his fingers grazed mine. The city hummed below, but up there it was just us. "What are we doing, Ethan?" I whispered, terrified and alive. "Figuring it out," he replied, his smile soft but certain. "Together." But the hospital wasn't a bubble. Rumors spread like wildfire, and I felt eyes on us. Colleagues, nurses, even patients. Dr. Margaret Hensley, the chief of surgery, was a traditionalist with a sharp tongue and a knack for sniffing out distractions. She'd already warned me about professional boundaries after catching Ethan and me laughing too long in the break room. "You're here to save lives, Dr. Harper," she'd said, her tone icy. "Not to make friends." I tried to keep my distance, but Ethan was a gravitational pull. One evening, we were charting the doctor's lounge when he leaned over, his breath warm against my ear. "Meet me at the lakefront tonight," he murmured. "Just us." My pulse spiked, but I nodded, unable to say no. That night, under the shadow of Adler Planetarium, Lake Michigan shimmering in the moonlight, Ethan kissed me. It was tentative at first, then urgent, like he'd been holding back as long as I had. The world fell away. No hospital, no judgment, just his lips on mine, his hands pulling me close. "I've wanted this since the scrub room," he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. I laughed, breathless, and kissed him again, feeling free for the first time in years. But freedom came with a cost. The next day, a nurse caught us stealing a moment in a storage closet, her shocked gasp echoing like a gunshot. By afternoon, whispers followed me down the halls. My phone buzzed with a text from my older brother, Mark, who worked in hospital admin. "People are talking, Lucas. Be careful." My stomach twisted. I wasn't ready for the world to know. Not my colleagues, not my family, not even myself. Ethan, sensing my panic, pulled me into an empty exam room. "We don't have to hide," he said, his eyes fierce. "But I won't push you. This is your call." His words were a lifeline, but they also felt like a challenge. Could I be brave enough to live openly like him? Or would fear win again? As weeks turned into months, our relationship deepened, but so did the tension. I was falling for Ethan, his laugh, his courage, the way he made me feel seen. But every touch, every shared look felt like a risk. My parents called, asking why I seemed distant. Mark's warnings grew sharper, hinting at complaints to the hospital board. I started pulling away, skipping our rooftop talks, avoiding Ethan's gaze in the OR. One night, during a rare, quiet shift, Ethan cornered me in the cafeteria. "You're shutting me out," he said, his voice raw. "I can't do this alone, Lucas." His pain cut deeper than any scalpel. I wanted to tell him I loved him, that I was terrified of losing him, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I mumbled, "I need time," and walked away, hating myself. The next day, a trauma case came in, a car crash victim, critical, needing emergency surgery. Ethan and I were assigned together, our first time since our fight. The air was thick with tension, but we moved like a single unit, our hands steady, our focus absolute. As we closed the patient's chest, Ethan's gloved hand brushed mine, deliberate and lingering. "We're better together," he whispered, and I knew he meant more than surgery. That night, I found him on the roof, staring at the skyline. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice breaking, "but I don't want to lose you." He turned, his eyes softening, and pulled me into his arms. "Then don't," he said simply. For the first time, I believed I could be brave. The hospital roof became our sanctuary, a place where Ethan and I could steal moments away from prying eyes. Under the Chicago sky, we talked about everything, our fears, our dreams, the lives we wanted beyond the hospital's walls. But the outside world kept creeping in, threatening to shatter what we'd built. My brother Mark's texts grew more insistent. "Dad heard rumors. He's furious. Call him." I ignored them, but the weight of my family's expectations pressed harder each day. Ethan, meanwhile, was a beacon of defiance. He'd faced rejection before and wore his scars with pride, but I could see the toll my hesitation took on him. One night, as we sat on the roof, he took my hand, his thumb tracing circles on my palm. "I want a future with you, Lucas," he said, his voice steady but vulnerable. "But I need to know you're all in." His words hung between us, heavy with hope and fear. I wanted to promise him everything, but the thought of my parents' disapproval, of losing them, choked me. The hospital wasn't any safer. Dr. Hensley summoned me to her office, her expression cold. "There's talk about you and Dr. Caldwell," she said, her voice like steel. "Personal relationships, compromised patient care. End it, or your residency is at risk." My stomach dropped. Losing my residency meant losing everything I'd worked for. I nodded, numb, and left her office, avoiding Ethan's eyes in the hall. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, replaying Hensley's ultimatum and Ethan's plea. I loved him, God, I loved him, but the cost of being open felt too high. My phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mother. "Lucas, we raised you better than this. Come home. We'll fix this." Her words stung, but they also lit a spark of anger. Fix me? Like I was broken? I met Ethan at the lakefront the next evening, the same place we'd first kissed. The wind off Lake Michigan was sharp, mirroring the edge of my voice. "I can't lose my career," I told him, my fist clenched. "But I can't lose you either." He stepped closer, his eyes searching mine. "Then fight for both," he said. "You're stronger than you think." His faith in me was a lifeline, but it also terrified me. Could I really stand up to everyone, my family, the hospital, the world? The answer came sooner than I expected. A week later, a mass casualty event hit St. Mary's. An apartment fire, dozens injured, the ER in chaos. Ethan and I were thrown into back-to-back surgeries, our personal drama buried under the urgency of saving lives. In the OR, we were unstoppable, our movements fluid, our trust unspoken but absolute. Between cases, he caught my arm in the scrub room. "We're a team, Lucas," he said, his voice fierce. "No one can take that from us." I nodded, my throat tight, and in that moment I knew I'd fight for him. But the hospital gossip machine didn't stop. A nurse, bitter over a recent reprimand, leaked a photo of us together on the roof, our hands entwined. It spread like wildfire on social media, tagged with slurs and sneers. By morning, it had reached my parents. My father called, his voice shaking with rage. "You're throwing your life away for this choice," he spat. "You know, son of mine." The line went dead, and I sat there, hollow, the phone still in my hand. Ethan found me in the on-call room, my face buried in my hands. He didn't say anything, just pulled me into his arms and held me as I broke. "I've lost them," I whispered. "My family." He kissed my forehead, his voice steady. "You haven't lost me." His strength anchored me, but the pain of my father's words lingered like a bruise. The hospital board called a meeting, and I knew what was coming. Dr. Hensley had been gunning for us, and the photo gave her ammunition. Ethan and I sat side by side in her office, her glare cutting through us. "Your behavior is unprofessional," she said. "Dr. Harper, you're on probation. Dr. Caldwell, one more incident, and you're out." Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't flinch. "We're not breaking any rules," he said calmly. "We're doing our jobs better than most." I wanted to speak, to defend us, but fear kept me silent. As we left her office, Ethan's hand brushed mine, a quiet reminder of his promise. But the hospital felt like a minefield now, every glance a potential explosion. Colleagues whispered behind our backs. Some supported us quietly, others turned away. Mark pulled me aside, his face grim. "You're throwing away your future," he said. "For what?" "A fling." His words stung, but they also clarified something. Ethan wasn't a fling. He was my future. That night, I went to Ethan's apartment, a small loft in Wicker Park. We cooked dinner, laughed, and for a few hours, pretended the world wasn't against us. As we lay in bed, his arms around me, I whispered, "I'm all in." He smiled, his eyes shining. "Took you long enough," he teased, but his kiss was fierce like a vow. The next morning, we walked into the hospital hand in hand. It was a small act, but it felt like a revolution. Heads turned, whispers followed, but I held my head high, Ethan's grip steadying me. In the OR, we were flawless, saving a patient with a ruptured aorta in a surgery that left the team in awe. Afterward, a nurse, one who'd once sneered, clapped me on the shoulder. "You two are something else," she said, a grudging respect in her voice. But the fight wasn't over. My parents sent a letter, formal and cold, disowning me unless I repented. I read it once, then burned it in Ethan's fireplace, his hand on my shoulder. "You're enough," he said. "You've always been enough." For the first time, I believed him. The hospital became a battleground, but Ethan and I fought together. We were careful, professional in the OR, discreet in public, but we refused to hide. Our colleagues began to split. Some, like Dr. Rachel Nguyen, a fellow resident, became our quiet allies, slipping us coffee or covering shifts when the pressure mounted. Others, loyal to Hensley, watched us like hawks, waiting for a misstep. I learned to live with the scrutiny, but it wore on me, a constant reminder of what I risked. One evening, as we left the hospital, a group of protesters stood outside, holding signs. "Homosexuality is a sin. Keep our hospitals pure." My stomach churned. Ethan squeezed my hand, his voice low. "Ignore them. They don't know us." But one of the protesters, a man with my father's build, locked eyes with me, and for a moment, I saw my family's judgment in his face. I pulled my hand away, instinct overriding courage. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he didn't say a word. At home, I apologized, pacing his loft. "I'm trying, Ethan. It's just hard." He pulled me close, his voice gentle but firm. "I know, but we're worth it." His belief in us was unshakable, and it gave me the strength to keep going. We started attending local LGBTQ support groups, meeting others who'd faced similar battles. Their stories of loss, resilience, and love helped me see a future beyond the hospital's walls. In the OR, we were untouchable. A high-profile case came in, a senator's son, 19, with a congenital heart defect. The surgery was complex, a marathon of delicate repairs, and Ethan and I led the team. Hours in, a complication arose. The patient's blood pressure plummeted. Ethan's calm voice guided me through the crisis, our hands moving as one to stabilize him. When we finished, the boy's mother hugged us, tears streaming. "You saved my son," she said. For a moment, I felt invincible. But the victory was short-lived. Hensley called us in, her face a mask of disdain. "The senator's family complained," she said. "They don't want controversial doctors treating their son." It was a lie. Ethan had overheard the mother praising us, but Hensley seized the chance to tighten her grip. "Dr. Harper, you're off surgical rotation. Desk duty until further notice." My heart sank. Desk duty was a death sentence for a surgeon's career. Ethan exploded. "This is discrimination, and you know it." Hensley's eyes narrowed. "Watch your tone, Dr. Caldwell. You're on thin ice." We left her office, my hands shaking with rage and fear. Ethan pulled me into a stairwell, his voice urgent. "We can fight this, Lucas. Together." But doubt crept in. Was loving him worth losing everything? That night, I dreamed of the OR, but the patient was me, my chest open, Ethan holding my heart. I woke in a cold sweat, his arms around me. "You're okay," he murmured, kissing my temple. I clung to him, the dream's weight lingering. "I can't lose you," I said, my voice breaking. He smiled, soft and sure. "You won't." The next day, Rachel slipped me a petition signed by half the surgical staff, demanding my reinstatement. "You're one of us," she said. We've got your back. Emboldened, I filed a formal complaint against Hensley with the hospital board, citing discrimination. Ethan backed me, his testimony sharp and unflinching. The board promised a review, but the waiting was agony. Meanwhile, my parents' silence grew louder. I wrote them a letter, pouring out my truth. I'm gay. I love Ethan. I'm not ashamed. I mailed it, knowing they might never respond, but it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. Ethan framed the draft, hanging it in his loft. This is who you are, he said, his eyes proud. I kissed him, feeling lighter than I ever had. The board's review dragged on, but we kept working, kept loving. One night, we volunteered at a free clinic in Boys Town, treating patients who'd been turned away elsewhere. A young man, barely 20, came in with a fractured arm, his eyes haunted. He'd been attacked for being gay. As I said his cast, he whispered, "You're brave, being out here." I glanced at Ethan, suturing a patient nearby, and realized he was right. We were brave, not perfect, but trying. Back at the loft, Ethan pulled out a ring, simple and silver, his hands trembling. "I don't care what the world says," he said. "Marry me, Lucas." My breath caught, tears blurring my vision. "Yes," I whispered, and we kissed, the world fading to nothing but us. The ring felt heavy on my finger, a promise of forever. The ring on my finger was a quiet rebellion, a symbol of the life Ethan and I were building. But the hospital board's review loomed like a storm cloud. We kept our heads down, focusing on patients, but Hensley's shadow followed us. She assigned Ethan to night shifts, isolating him, and kept me buried in paperwork far from the OR. It was a deliberate attempt to break us, but we held on, stealing moments in stairwells and empty exam rooms. One morning, a lawyer from the board called. "We've reviewed your complaint," she said. "There's evidence of bias. Dr. Hensley's been suspended pending investigation." Relief flooded me, but it was bittersweet. Hensley's allies still ran the hospital, and the senator's family had hired a PR firm to smear us, painting us as unstable doctors. The headline stung, but Ethan laughed them off. "Let them talk," he said, kissing me. "We're still here." The smear campaign hit harder than I expected. Patients began requesting other doctors, and colleagues who'd once been neutral now avoided us. Rachel and a few others stood by us, but the isolation was suffocating. One night, after a 14-hour shift, I found Ethan in the on-call room, his face drawn. "I'm tired, Lucas," he admitted. "Not of you, of fighting everyone else." It was the first time I'd seen him waver, and it terrified me. I took his hand, the ring glinting under the fluorescent lights. "We're almost through this," I said, though I wasn't sure I believed it. He nodded, but his smile didn't reach his eyes. That night, we made love in his loft, desperate and tender, as if we could hold the world at bay. "I'd do it all again," he whispered, his voice raw. "For you." I held him tighter, vowing to fight harder. The turning point came unexpectedly. A local news outlet, tipped off by Rachel, ran a story about our discrimination case, framing us as dedicated doctors targeted for our identities. The response was overwhelming. Letters, emails, even patients showing up with thank you notes. A protest formed outside the hospital, this time in our favor, with signs reading "Love heals" and "Let doctors love." I stood with Ethan on the roof, watching the crowd, my heart swelling. "They see us," I said, my voice thick. He squeezed my hand. "They always did." The board reinstated me to surgical rotation, and Ethan's night shifts ended. Hensley resigned, her allies quieted, and the hospital issued a public apology. It wasn't perfect, some colleagues still whispered, and the senator's PR firm didn't stop, but it felt like a victory. We celebrated at the lakefront, the same place we'd first kissed, toasting with cheap wine and laughter. "To us," Ethan said, his eyes shining. "To love." But my family remained a wound that wouldn't heal. A month after the board's decision, my brother Mark showed up at the hospital, his face unreadable. "Mom's sick," he said. "Lung cancer. She wants to see you." My heart stopped. I hadn't spoken to my parents in months, their rejection a constant ache. Ethan offered to come, but I shook my head. I need to do this alone. The drive to Ohio was a blur of nerves and memories. My mother lay in a hospital bed, frail but sharp-eyed. "Lucas," she said, her voice weak. I was wrong. Tears stung my eyes as she reached for my hand. "I don't understand your life, but I want you in mine." My father stood silent in the corner, his face soft for the first time in years. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. I called Ethan that night, sobbing. "They didn't disown me," I said. He laughed softly. "Of course they didn't. You're impossible to let go." When I returned to Chicago, he was waiting at the airport, his arms open. I ran to him, the ring on my finger catching the light, and knew I was home. Spring arrived in Chicago, and with it, a sense of renewal. Ethan and I moved into a new apartment, a cozy place near Lake Michigan where we could start fresh. The hospital, under new leadership, implemented diversity training, and we became unofficial mentors to younger residents navigating their identities. The scars of the past year lingered, but they made us stronger, our love a testament to what we'd overcome. One morning, as we prepared for a routine surgery, Ethan pulled me aside in the scrub room, his eyes bright. "I've been thinking," he said. "Let's get married this summer, right here by the lake." My heart soared. We'd fought so hard for this, for us, and now we could build a future without fear. I nodded, grinning like an idiot. "Let's do it." The wedding was small, just close friends and a few colleagues, on a sunny day at the lakefront. Rachel was my best woman, her speech making everyone cry and laugh. My parents didn't come, but my mother sent a letter, her handwriting shaky but warm. "I'm proud of you, Lucas. Be happy." It was enough. Ethan's vows were simple, his voice steady. "You made me believe in forever." Mine were messy, choked with tears, but he kissed me before I finished, and the crowd cheered. In the OR, we remained a force, our teamwork legendary. Patients requested us, their trust a quiet rebuke to the senator's smear campaign. We started a scholarship for LGBTQ medical students, funded by donations from the community that had rallied for us. Every time I saw a young doctor walk taller because of it, I felt the weight of our fight lift. Years later, standing on our balcony overlooking the lake, Ethan's arms around me, I thought back to that first surgery, when his voice had pulled me from the edge. "You saved me," I said, turning to kiss him. He smiled, his eyes crinkling. We saved each other. Our love wasn't just a rebellion. It was a revolution, a beacon for others to follow. We'd face the world's judgment and come out stronger, proving that love, like healing, could defy any odds. And as the city lights sparkled below, I knew we'd keep fighting together for every breathless moment.